World of Warcraft Classic has finally gone and done it. They answered the people and they released Classic Plus. Kind of. It's called Season of Discovery. A phased approach to the classic World of Warcraft featuring new takes on classes like a Warlock tank, or perhaps you've heard of the fabled Mage Healer. Each phase will have a separate level cap. There are runes that are scattered throughout the world which are unique to each class, granting new abilities that you can engrave onto your armor pieces, which will literally change how your class plays and functions. There's new world PvP and PvE content, as well as some new raids. Phase 1 was released on November 30th, and at the time of recording this, it is December 4th. I've leveled up my character, gotten plenty of the new runes, experienced a metric ton of players competing and playing the game, and I even got to participate in the new raid, BlackFathom Deeps. It's just the original BlackFathom Deeps 5-man dungeon, but it's had some changes. It's a little bit more difficult and there's some more mechanics. Let me take you through my season of discovery, talk about some of the good and the bad, and in the end, find out if you should try Season of Discovery and decide, should Blizzard continue with these seasonal game modes for the classic version of World of Warcraft? Let's jump into it. Or should I say, let's wait 3 hours for the queue of literally thousands of players trying to get into the game, and then once you get onto the server, you find out you can't make an alliance character, so you hop back into another multiple thousand player long queue, only to eventually get fed up and give up playing on a PvP server because you're more interested in the PvE changes anyway. We are now role-playing. I decided to go with a human mage. In the release of Classic WoW, I actually played a gnome mage, but the problem with gnomes is that they are short. And I personally prefer to have my in-game character to at least somewhat reasonably depict me in real life. So being the definitely tall, definitely over 6 foot, and not just on dating apps person that I am in real life, I promise, it seemed human was the obvious choice. Now, I've learned more about WoW in the past few days than the rest of my entire life spent playing this game on and off. Competing with literally hundreds of players for a single wolf spawn that doesn't even have a guaranteed drop of the quest item you need, well, it does something to a person. You have to adapt, change, overcome. This is when I learned the meta of camping a single monster's spawn just in order to make quest progress, which I then continued to do for every single quest in the starting zone. Even though Blizzard added a hyper-spawning system that allowed for certain mobs in more popular leveling areas of the game to spawn more and at a much faster rate, that still almost did nothing for the first few hours of this game's release. It was just that packed. I finished up in Northshire, and this is where you actually unlock your very first rune. For mages, you get an Ice Lance ability, which actually comes in so clutch, because essentially up until this point, if you wanted to instantly tag a mob before someone else, your fastest cast was an auto attack with your staff. Ice Lance definitely gave me the upper hand moving forward in terms of tagging mobs. It's not quite as good as Fire Blast, which you get later on, because Ice Lance is still a projectile, but we'll take it for now. I experienced my first death in the Fargo Deep Mine. Don't ask me how, it was literally so packed it was difficult to find a mob, and somehow I still managed to die. I killed Goldtooth and ended up getting to level 9 in just a couple of short hours. Leveling was much slower in the first few hours of the game's release, contrary to other Blizzard releases of the past with many options for servers. For Season of Discovery, they only originally gave us 6 servers to work with, promising that they would not be adding any more later on. But they quickly added another server because, according to the senior game developer for Classic, Josh Greenfield, there's full and then there's really full. But honestly, even though there were long queues and ridiculous competition for mobs and areas while leveling, it brought forth a sort of communal feel that you only really get during a new game's release. It was a dog-eat-dog world, but no one really got too angry. If you were just about to tag a mob and someone else came along and grabbed it right at the second you were about to, well, tough luck. I was constantly grouping up with other players when that made certain quests more viable. I learned that if somebody pulls an entire pack of enemies, you can actually steal one of them away if they haven't tagged it yet. I was experiencing nostalgia, community, but also something new. I got to level 10, assigned my first talent point, and killed Hogger, and that gave me my second rune, Fingers of Frost, which acts as a buff to a Frost Mage's chill effects. Mostly, up until this point, Classic felt relatively similar to any other Classic servers that I had played before. Day 1 was the Wild Wild West, and no one really knew anything about where to get the new runes, where to look for new abilities, or, to be honest, even where to kill mobs, because the game was just ridiculously packed. But true to its name, Discovery, I and many other players were really excited to see what the future held for us. I still had 10 other potentially class-changing and playstyle-deciding runes that I could unlock. I ended day 1 at about midnight my time. I was level 12, just about 13. My character looked about as badass as you can possibly look in Classic WoW, and honestly, I haven't been this addicted or excited for Classic WoW in a very long time. Day 2. What the fuck? People are already level 19. Okay, well now I was falling a little bit behind. By the end of today, I wanted to at least clear Dead Mines and kind of finish off the Westfall area, potentially moving over to Darkshore and Aberdeen if needed. The fighting for mobs continued, and if anything, Westfall was even more packed than the night before because everyone else had kind of caught up at this point. I got to level 14, traveled around pretty heavily between Red Ridge, Loch Modan, and even stood in a line with a group of players for these Trog bosses, which had an insanely long respawn timer compared to basically everything else in the game. Speaking of groups waiting for something, I was tasked with killing the Defias Messenger. There was a group camping his spawn. I politely asked if I could join them, and they said that they were full. Well, like I said, it's a dog-eat-dog world, so I promptly outskilled them and stole the Defias Messenger for myself. Some information was beginning to come out online of where you could acquire more runes for each of the classes, so I decided to do a bit of research and I found out a few more runes that I could unlock for Mage. I got my first healing rune, Regeneration, from a Defias Pillager in Westfall. Mages have a cool damage-based healing system where essentially you heal, but you also heal more by doing more damage, which is a super cool idea. Mage healing is something that I want to try in the future, but for the time being, I was just looking to top some DPS meters. Afterwards, I unlocked the Living Bomb Room, which I picked up from a Trog in Loch Modan. This is a fantastic fire damage over time ability that ends with an AoE. I also found a bunch of non-Elwyn Forest animals roaming around Elwyn Forest. By casting Polymorph on 6 of these out-of-place critters, I got myself the Enlightenment rune, which just gives you a flat damage increase and helps with mana regeneration. Not long after, me and a bunch of casters used fire spells on this frozen Murloc, unlocking the ability Burnout, which is an insane AoE DPS ability for the fire spec. Like I said today, I really only had one goal in mind. I wanted to finish a Dead Mines run, so I got myself to level 17 and I figured I could start looking for a group. I convinced this ragtag group of friends to bring me along despite the fact that we had 2 level 15s in the group. We made easy work of the Dead Mines. I managed to get myself one of my best in slot rings, and we only had to jump on the wheel one time. Van Cleef was no more, and I was on top of the world. I acquired the Staff of Westfall, and even though I had already probably played for 8 hours since I logged in this morning, I had absolutely no signs of slowing down. On my way over to Darkshore, I found out what playing on an RP server was really all about. This dwarf completely changed my perspective on World of Warcraft players forever. I mean, this dude was RPing so fucking hard. It was amazing. He was an absolute inspiration, and from this point forward, I will always make a point to. Anyway, Darkshore is a nice place for leveling, but I was exhausted. Level 19 and ready for bed. Beginning of day 3. The final day of leveling. The reason today had to be the final day of leveling is because my guild, OnlyFangs, had a BFD raid scheduled almost exactly 24 hours from now, which means if I wanted to be included in the raid, I needed to get to level 25 from level 19.5, and I had to do it today. Normally, that's not a very monumental task, but as mentioned, the world was still jam-fucking-packed. At level 20, I got myself to Ashenvale. This is where the world PvP takes place in Season of Discovery, although apparently it wasn't very active just yet, as there weren't too many level 25s on my server. This is also the location of BFD, the raid we would be going to shortly. I somehow organically stumbled upon a room for my class, which was one of the coolest moments that I actually experienced in Season of Discovery. I killed one of these mermaids, which dropped a book and hinted at arcane power if I found these crystals around the Zoram Strand. After finding 3 of the crystals, I unlocked Arcane Blast, which sounded seriously overpowered. It makes the mage arcane spec completely viable. It also helps a ton with mage healing. You might remember from the original version of Classic that Arcane was one of the worst specs you could have chosen as a mage. There's definitely going to be some interesting builds around this rune, and I was excited to see what those would look like later on. Level 20, I made my way back to my class trainer, and my god, level 20 is so good on a mage. Evocate, Blizzard, and most importantly, Blink. You see, in Season of Discovery, there is only one mount available for players in Phase 1, because the level cap is 25, and in Classic WoW you can't unlock the riding skill until level 40. However, in Ashenvale, you can get mounts that can only be used within Ashenvale. They're somehow unlocked through the open world PvP that I was talking about in that area. Either way, Blink was a massive upgrade. Any class that has mobility options, from hunters with aspect of the cheetah to druids and shamans with different speed increasing forms, it definitely gives you a huge advantage in terms of getting around the game. While I was questing around in Red Ridge, something pretty amazing happened. I got a random blue bind on equip item to drop. The Prospector Axe. The server is super new, so items like this are really in high demand, but at the same time, it can be difficult to sell it for a decent price because of the lack of gold that's currently been brought into the game. We haven't really had the time for prices to regulate or inflation to set in. Either way, I was stoked to put this on the auction house. There were a couple of other offers up, but using my marketing degree for the first time in my life, I undercut the other sellers by a few silver. And I put it up for 4 gold and 99 silver to subconsciously convince any potential buyers that they were getting a bargain. I was questing my way into Duskwood when some of my guildmates decided it's time we try out the Wailing Caverns, which is an instance that is very, very far away. The entire process took us about 2.5 hours from beginning to end and severely cut into my remaining leveling time, but that's okay. It turns out my marketing tactic ended up working, by the way, and I was now rich as fuck. 9 gold in the bank, 3 days into a server's release. Not bad. The day was beginning to wear on me as I went back to do more leveling in Duskwood, slogging my way through the early 20s while still competing with mobs time and time again. But then, a stroke of luck. A random group was asking for others to join them in the stockades. They were all almost level 25 with many quests to share. This absolutely boosted my morale by not only getting me to level 24, but basically halfway to 25 as well. After some elite quests in Red Ridge, it was finally time. I had finally made it. Level 25. Now, one thing I would like to point out here is that max level is such a subjective thing. Like, normally in any other time that I've played World of Warcraft, digging 25 is such a non-monumental moment. But in Season of Discovery, because of the lower level cap, I almost got the same amount of dopamine hitting level 25 as I might hitting level 60 in other versions of WoW Classic. Like, it's not impressive, it doesn't take a lot of time, and you've basically just completed the beginning of the game, but damn, did it feel good. I was so excited to be level 25 and begin working on this strange endgame meta, but in the middle or even early part of the classic WoW that I originally knew so well. I slept well that night and woke up this morning with a new idea. Day 4, raid day. I figured I might respec fire for the raid. With the current runes that I had unlocked, many of them being fairly high damage in terms of fire, I think it might actually be better than my current frost loadout. Plus, you don't unlock the ranked 5 version of Frostbolt until level 26, but you actually unlock the upgrade for Firebolt at level 24. We had a few hours before raid, so I started training up my professions. Professions were capped at level 150, so I decided to work on first aid. So far, I hadn't really picked up any other professions because I had just been focused on leveling. I think at some point in the future I'm going to go for something like engineering or tailoring, but I haven't decided yet. I figured while wasting some time, I would try my hand at some Warsong Gulch instanced PvP. Never before has Warsong Gulch been capped at level 25. Always the level ranges have been 10 to 19 or 20 to 29. Never before had we seen twinks or people make accounts specifically for level 25, so I figured this would be pretty interesting. I played a few games, we won a couple, and I was getting a fairly decent amount of honor kills and doing a decent amount of damage, but one thing I noticed was hunters were just absolutely destroying everyone. Now, this is understandable. Hunters have always been a favorite of min-maxers, especially in the earlier level brackets, as the DPS they can do along with their pet just makes them an excellent choice for the early game. But my god, the hunters, man, and this was even after they got a nerf within the first couple of days after Season of Discovery's release. They just shot through me like butter. It didn't help that I only had about 550 hit points. Anyway, the time was now, the moment that I had been waiting for since I stepped foot in Northshire just a few days prior with hundreds of other players. All of us having the same dream of potentially stepping foot into the new, but kinda not new raid, BlackFathom Deeps. My guild has 990 plus members because they spam invited when the server was released. So needless to say, I didn't have the highest expectations, but we actually managed to scrounge together 2 separate raid groups, and we were entering at the same time. I was actually really excited to see what this raid looked like. As a primarily Alliance player throughout my life, I've never really done much of the original 5-man dungeon of BlackFathom Deeps, because it's so out of the way and it can be difficult to find groups for usually, so for me this was going to be a pretty new experience inside and out. We had 2 tanks, 2 healers, 3 caster DPS, but I was the only mage. Nice. Maybe I would get my chance at some killer loot. Oh, by the way, I should mention, they also completely reworked all the loot in the dungeon, so the raid drops some seriously powerful gear, especially in the level 25 range. Stats like this you would have never seen on gear in this level bracket in the original classic WoW. Basically, all of us had no clue what we were getting into. We didn't know what to expect, and we decided to just jump in and learn through trial and error. So naturally, we wiped on the first boss. He's actually super annoying to deal with because of a bunch of knockback abilities, but afterwards we got him down on our second try. I was dead though. I don't want to talk about it. Oh, also, I rolled a 1 on this cape, and that was definitely an upgrade. Hopefully that's my only bit of bad luck for this raid. The second boss was a giant turtle who shot out tons of these little bubbles. Basically, don't stand in stupid and you're totally fine. This guy, we got him down first try. No caster gear though. The third boss, Lady Cerevis, another pretty simple fight. She has some ads that you need to deal with and a cast that you have to interrupt. These were seemingly a little too easy so far, and I knew the difficulty would get harder with each boss, but we had heard some rumors that this raid wasn't the easiest thing in the world, so I was growing a little apprehensive. Oh yeah, and once again, no caster drops. The fourth boss! A goddamn Murloc. To be honest, I had almost no issues with this fight. Basically, it gets a little chaotic and you need to run around avoiding a ton of shadow Murlocs and these pools of purple, but we kept losing our healers to this mechanic, which resulted in a few wipes. We got him down on our third try, and at this point, I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe that was the toughest part of this new raid. Maybe. Oh yeah, and again, no caster drops. The fifth boss, Lorcus. What a name. What a name. This guy's annoying. He drops totems down, and one of them, the lightning totem, acts as a reflect, so if you damage the boss, you get hit pretty hard from the lightning totem. It's super important. Your whole raid DPSs this totem every time it spawns. He also has a whole host of other annoying mechanics, but the key to your group's survival is dealing with these lightning totems. We wiped a few times here, but eventually got a bit of a rhythm that allowed us to take him down, though it was a pretty long fight. Now, this guy is literally wearing caster gear. He's gotta drop something for me, right? Nope, all leather. The sixth boss, Twilight Lord Kelris. If you're a casual raid group like we were, maybe just stop at 5 bosses. Like, don't even go to this boss until you guys have better gear and you watch a few guides and maybe wait until it gets nerfed. This guy's insane. Seeing as we really went into this raid basically blind, we got completely wrecked. He has a few mechanics that really threw us for a loop. First of all, he puts 2 members to sleep and into a dream world where they need to deal with their own set of mechanics there. He also throws up non-stop dots which do a ton of damage that need to be dispelled so much you almost need a dedicated healer just to dispel people. And on top of that, if you stand in purple, you're dead. It's positional, mechanic heavy, role dependent, and definitely pretty damn difficult, especially for Classic WoW and especially at level 25. This isn't even the last boss of the raid, there's still one more to go after that. But unfortunately for us and my group, after wiping a couple of times, we decided to stop there for the night. We were honestly pretty happy with our progress, 5 of 7 bosses done, going in completely blind. I was happy with the results, and we'll try this Twilight Lord again in a few days after the reset. Unfortunately for me, I literally did not get a single piece of loot in that raid. Even all of the greens that dropped from trash were either not upgrades or I lost the role. But that's okay, I had an absolute blast, and I'm already stoked to head back into BFD. All in all, Season of Discovery has been an amazing experience so far. I'm going to take you through some of my favorite things about Season of Discovery, and then some things that I think could use some work or I would like to see added in the future. But there's something here that I need to mention. I'm assuming we're all MMO players here. It would be strange if you were somehow not an MMO player and you made it this far into this video. But you guys know that feeling. That feeling you get when you really, really want to play an MMO. You know, the itch. The feeling that almost no other game ever seems to capture, and even when you return to some of your old favorite MMOs, it never really scratches that itch exactly like you wanted it to. Well, for me, Season of Discovery actually did it. I actually felt like a young Waydot again, playing through World of Warcraft for one of the first times. I don't know if that's just because of the community around me and the excitement of starting a fresh server, or if it has been the changes to the game and the classes and the lower level cap to start with. I really can't pinpoint exactly what did it, but it scratched that itch for me. If you're watching this and you've been playing Season of Discovery, let me know. How has this season been for you? I'm genuinely curious. But let's get into some of my favorite parts of this version of Classic WoW. Number 1, and it basically has to be number 1 here, the class changes are so cool. Warlock tank, rogue tank, mage healer, allowing for these different playstyles in a game that people are so familiar with and have been playing for almost 20 years is an absolute breath of fresh air. That was much needed and has been an absolutely unique experience. Number 2, the phased level cap approach is a super cool way to experience Classic WoW. Basically, right now the level cap is 25, and because of that, all of the lower level zones and areas are and will continue to be completely packed until the next phase comes out. It also shortens the game in a sense at the beginning, making it so that potentially creating alts in the future isn't such a daunting task. Number 3, the new raid. Obviously, creating new PvE content for people to enjoy is something people have been asking for from Classic WoW for a very long time. And so far, it seems like BFD was actually really well done, if fairly difficult for us to complete. And finally, the sense of community. This, of course, is not exclusive to just Season of Discovery. We see the same with every release of a new iteration of Classic, especially in the beginning, but for some reason, I had an even stronger feeling of community with Season of Discovery. It's really been an awesome experience learning and exploring and discovering the new parts of the game with everyone else. Now, normally when I do these types of videos, I bring 4 positives and 4 negatives at the end of the video. However, I'm going to be completely honest here, I don't really have 4 negatives to bring. So I'm just going to talk about 2 things that I think should be implemented or at least thought about in the terms of future releases of seasonal content. Number 1, this is a bit of an impossible ask, but somehow allowing the correct amount of server space and layers to exist so that you can maintain the massive feeling of thousands of players playing, but maybe reduce queue times and competition for questing and mobs in certain areas. Like I said, probably an impossible task, but I think this would do so much for new players and returning players coming back to the game. Number 2, this is a limited time game mode, meaning that once all the phases are complete, Season of Discovery will be over. I would love to see other seasons with different iterations or takes on Classic WoW in the future, or even a potentially non-seasonal version of this that is just continuously updating, something akin to what people have been wanting from a Classic Plus. Anyway, folks, should you try Season of Discovery? Well, if you're a fan of Classic WoW, this is definitely the time to play. It's a completely unique take and a different way to play the game, and it's so active right now, you won't be missing out on anything. I'm going to be continuing to play this game, and if this video does really well, I'll make another video documenting my progression in Phase 2. So make sure to drop a like and comment something to help me get this video out there to the algorithm gods. I want to say a massive thank you to all of you who made it to the end of the video. If you really enjoyed the video, there's a link to my Patreon down in the description, but I'll catch you all in the next one. Later.